Hello tree lovers, welcome to the Bonsai Stuff podcast. I'm Scott Martin from Bonsai Matsu, and we all share that common passion, that common driver that makes us all a little bit crazy, I think, that we love these little trees in pots. So thank you for listening in, thank you for coming back to episode 9 of season 8 of the podcast. It's flying along, and I want to talk in this episode of the podcast about what to do with whips or with tube stock, or with some cuttings that you've taken and not quite sure what to do with the plant. It all stems from a message I received from a fella, Blake, in New South Wales, just inquiring about what you do with younger stock. There's lots to talk about, ramifying and developing and that sort of stuff. But I just thought I'd go through what my suggestions or what my approach is, I suppose, with this young stock, and thinking, how I think somewhere in the future for what they're going to be. So I thought that would be timely, because now early autumn, there's it's quite a good time to get in to work on the trees. They start becoming a little bit more pliable. Still going to heal if there's little cracks and that sort of thing, because it's still that growing period. So it's quite timely. But also want to chat about, and just as I mentioned at the end of last podcast, just talk about my approach with fertilising. Just a quick review. I've talked about fertilising till I'm blue in the face, but it's really important, and I just want to give a quick reminder and an approach that I use that's quite simple and easy, that I think is beneficial. And that's the thing. And anything that I work on with my trees, I try and share, because I do go through a lot of trial and error. I've been doing it for a while, for a couple of weeks now. I've been working on bonsai, and I try and work out simpler, easier, consistent, and repeatable approaches that can be shared around. They're nothing special, and I certainly aim to make them definitely something that anyone that listens to the podcast can do in their own yard with their own trees, and not say, well, that's something that's not achievable for me, because it is. It's definitely achievable. And I'm sure that there's different ways of doing things. Always is. Sometimes it can be made overly complex unnecessarily. So I try and keep it really simple for everybody, and including myself, because I'm a simple kind of fella. And I like to make sure that I'm doing the best I possibly can with the material that I've got and with the time that I've got also. If I don't want to have to spend 24 hours a day working with fertiliser to make sure that my trees are getting the optimum. I want to try and do what I can do and move on with my life and live a life that we all have outside of bonsai. So I'll run through that with you and just share that. So it should be an interesting podcast. Thank you for listening. Let's get into it. Now, I'm certain that almost everybody listening to this podcast at some stage or another has taken cuttings. They may have planted seeds. You may have been to a nursery and picked up some young tube stock, like I talked about previously about my native tube stock that I grabbed, and you've had it at one point or another, and you can get a little bit lost. Probably isn't the right word, but you can get a little bit overwhelmed with what to do with these things. So you tend to leave them and put them aside. Young stock is brilliant. And I think that more of us should be getting into it. More of us should be doing it, because it's the future supply of brilliant bonsai, if it's managed correctly. If it's not, it's just really average trees that wind up trying to become great bonsai somewhere down the track. And I think if you can get a really solid start on young stock, then you are definitely on the path to beautiful, brilliant bonsai. In Australia, we do have limitations on stock. We do have age against us in comparison to the rest of the world, which is neither here nor there. But you definitely have a chance, an opportunity to work with young stock and set them up for the future. There's definitely bonsai nurseries do this stuff all the time, and that's what they do. They grab young stock, and every year they're adding to their stock that they've got, and then the next year that stock that they wired last year or worked on as young trees last year moves up to the next phase and the next phase and the next phase, and then we suddenly walk in there when it's had 10 years of this work behind the scenes, and we look at it and go, that's nice, I like that trunk line, or I like that branching, or I like this, or I like that. And then we acquire it and we start to work on it as bonsai. But it doesn't mean that we can't do that that sort of stuff, that sort of work ourselves to build stock. And it's cheap. It's readily available. Taking cuttings off something like a juniper that you've worked on, you can make a tree look beautiful, and all of a sudden on the ground you've got about 50 potential new cuttings there that you've got to work out what to do with if you do something with it. You get to a point where your yard gets so damn full that you can't take another tree in the collection. Great. Don't take the cuttings. But if you do, then I thought that this would be something that we could talk about together. And the options for working these tube stock or the young stock is, obviously we've got wiring. We can wire the trees. We can give them some beautiful trunk shape. We can cut them back. We can pick a new leader. We've got so many options. We've got sacrifice branching that we can use. We can talk about things like ground growing or growing into a large container. But there's a few things that need to stay front of mind when you're doing, or before you do anything, really. You've got to have a plan. And I love my plans. So it doesn't need to be set in concrete, doesn't need to be exact, doesn't need to be something that if it doesn't work out that way, then chuck it in the bin, it's done, it's finished. But I think you've got to, I know you've got to have some kind of an idea of what's going to happen somewhere in the future. And this, it's hard. I get it. I know it's hard. And this can be the part that you're sitting there listening to me talk going, oh, that's where I get stuck though. I don't know what it's going to look like in the future. I don't know. I can't see where that's going to go. I can twist it into a pretzel. I can manipulate this young tree within an inch of its life, but I can't see what's going to happen in the future for it. It's easy to put wire on something and smash it to pieces, but it's like, what is it going to be in the future? And that's the part that I get it, that there can be a struggle. But let's start with something really easy, something that's achievable with regard to the future of the tree. Look at it and go and decide, how tall do I want this tree to be? Do I want this tree to be a small tree, 10 centimetres? Do I want this tree to be a big tree, like a metre? Do I want this to be a medium-sized tree? They're the sort of things that you have to get your head around very early when you're working with stock. Otherwise, you're going to fall into the trap of going, I'm just going to shape them and then see what happens down the track. So you'll twist the stuffing out of them, and then suddenly you'll go, actually, I want this to be a bigger tree. But all those twists that you put on something that's about 10 or 20 centimetres tall suddenly becomes irrelevant, because that lower part of the trunk is going to be so twisted and gnarly, and then you're going to start developing a higher, straighter top area of the trunk. Because if you sort of kept those twists going on and on and on and on and on for a very tall tree, then they look doesn't look right. So if it's a bigger tree and you want some movement in it, which is great, then you would start with gentle movements, because if it's going to be a metre tall, then the movements might be, sort of 15, 20 centimetres apart from each other when you do it. So if you're working with a tree that's only 20 centimetres tall, it might be that's only getting one gentle arc into the, movement at the very base of the tree, and then it's starting to arc up towards the top. So it's working out whether it's, put in two categories. Is it a tall tree or is it a short tree? If it's a tall tree, then there's predominantly less bends down lower. Whereas if it's a short tree, there's more bends down lower on the tree. And if you're looking at 50 whips that you want to work on, split them. Half a tall, half a short. Just to get your head around the different approach. And I'm all about consistency. When you're doing a job, put on the blinkers and just stick with that one job until you finish it, and then move on to the next component. So it might be that you split them into large trees, small trees, and the small trees, you're wiring them all with lots of bends, right? Which I'll talk more on in a sec. But the bigger trees, when you start working on those, it's more gentle what you're doing now, because it needs to grow a lot taller and get more movement in it somewhere up higher. And it's irrelevant doing it's not appropriate to be doing all those bends when it's down low. So when you're applying the wire too, you want to make sure that you're not just working on the left and rights. Okay, you've got to think 3D. The best bonsai, the ones that really stand out, that look fantastic, have movement not just left and right, but they're also backwards and forwards. For me, when I work with trees, and again, this is part of the future planning for what you're doing with the bonsai for somewhere in the future. I like the base of my tree to arc back and then start to come forward, rather than that pigeon breast, that beer belly of the tree sticking out. Have it so it's going backwards and then it starts to come forward. So when I'm working with young stock, it's like, okay, it's going to be a short tree, so therefore that bend backwards has got to be a bit more aggressive, and I'm going to kink it out to, for instance, the right side. So it's going to go back to the right side of the base, then it's going to start coming up and forward and then twisting around back. Whatever it is, that movement, that distance between bends has got to be something which I'm planning for now to be consistent. So in the future, I don't look at a tree and go, okay, well, let's say there's 2 centimeters for the first bend, then the next one's 4 centimeters, then the next one's back to 2 centimeters, and the next one's 8 centimeters. It's like, okay, well, if the first one's about 2 centimeters, then as I naturally progress up my tree, I want that bend to either be about the same sort of distance or maybe just fractionally shorter. So 2 centimeters is probably the wrong example, but let's say it's something larger, like 5 centimeters for the first one. Well, then the next one might be 4 centimeters, and the next one might be 3 centimeters, the next one might be 2 centimeters. So it sort of starts to get a bit tighter as we get up closer towards the top, or the future apex of the tree. Those bends start to get a bit closer. And likewise, like I said before, if you're working with a potentially larger tree, then they might be doing the first bend now. Then it has to grow for 12 months, and you go, okay, well, that first bend that I've got on there is 20 centimeters. So the next one, maybe it's down to 17, 18 centimeters. Doesn't need to be exact. I'm using measurements to try and so you can visualize what I'm talking about when we're talking about this movement. But it's really important not to just go left and right with them. It's more important to get some kind of 3D dimensional movement in there. And if you're definitely planning on doing things like deadwood on the trunk, the shari line, then for something like a juniper or anything really, if you're thinking about deadwood on the tree, then have it so the grain of the tree twists and goes around, not necessarily like a corkscrew, but something similar to that, where it's sort of twisting around to the front, it's going around to the back. So as you start to peel off the fibers somewhere in the future and you're working on the deadwood of the tree, those veins will start to move in a 3-dimensional pattern as well. If you just bend the tree left and right, then the deadwood is just going to simply go left and right, which may be a little bit boring. Might be your plan. Fantastic if it is, but if it's not, getting that 3-dimensional movement in there from a very early age is very, very important. Very, very important. And make a massive difference to how the tree is going to be developed somewhere in the future. So while we're talking about wiring, when you're applying the wire, just think about where you want the bend to be while it's straight, while it's still the stick. Think about where you want that wire to be and make sure that when you're applying the wire, it's appropriate to where you want the bends to be. All right, you always want the wire on the outside of the bend. You don't want the wire on the inside of the bend because it's going to snap that little twig in a heartbeat. So make sure that the wire, especially if it's a severe bend, make sure the wire is going to sit exactly where you want it to be. For while you're getting used to it and you're thinking about it, look at the stick that you've got in front of you. Take a piece of chalk and go, okay, I really want to bend here on this side of the tree. Just put a little dab on it. Then I want to bend back on this side, and then I want to bend on this side. Just put little dabs of chalk on that stick. So as you're applying the wire, you're going to be forced, or you're going to remember, you're going to be reminded to say, okay, bend's going to be right there. That's exactly where the bend's going to be. All right, so the wire's got to gently flow around the outside of that. All right, so go up to the next one. Where's the next bend I've got to do? All right, so now the outside of the wire has to be on that next piece of chalk, and work your way up that little stick And then you'll still see the chalk there. You'll still have the wire on the tree. Then make sure that when you're bending, it's exactly where you plan for it to be. So your thumb or is on the inside of the wire, on the inside of that chalk mark. You're bending out using both hands, gently plying that little stick so that bend is protected by the wire on the outside. Don't do it as a rapid movement. I've talked about pulsing when you're bending just a little bit, and just gently do that bend. Or 2 pair of pliers. That's another great technique with these smaller trees to get really nice bends on them. But just make sure that you use something as a guide or a reminder. Don't put the wire on there and go, actually, I wanted the bend to be there. Now the wire's in the wrong spot, so I'm stuffed. I've got to either take the wire off or I've got to change my plan. So you developed a plan for this little tree, and if you don't apply the wire correctly, then your plan's going to change within the first couple of seconds of doing any work on the tree. So it's important to plan. It's important to think about what you're going to do. We've got to remember that you're setting a plan initially on these young trees for the height and for a potential shape of the trunk. It might be, I don't know, you might be beneficial for you to go, okay, well, especially early days when you're not sure what's going to happen. All right, this pile here is going to be tall. This pile here is going to be short. All right, so of those tall ones, that section there, they're going to be a slanting style. These ones, informal upright. These ones are going to be, maybe just a gentle bend on them. These ones might be formal uprights. Whatever floats your boat. Like, seriously, it doesn't matter, but it might help you just to categorize them early. And one tip I'll give you is you'll be repetitive. We all are with bonsai. We all tend to like things a certain way. So you might find that you're putting the wire on going in a anti-clockwise direction, and your first bend is always to the right, which seems to be one of my preferences. So force yourself to say, okay, this time I'm going to put the wire on in the opposite direction, and I'm going to bend to the left, or whatever it is that you find that you're doing over and over. Stop and do the complete opposite. Otherwise, every tree that you're going to have in that collection is going to start looking similar and have a similar feel to it. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it can help you to get to the next point by forcing yourself to stop and change. Another thing, you've got to remember when you've got these whips and you've wired them and you've put them into the categories, large, small, whatever it is, you're working on, okay, it's possibly going to be ground grown, or it's going to go into a larger container, or the next phase is going to be whatever it is. Just remember and remind yourself every single time that you work on that tree what stage of development that you're in. All right, so the first stage of development that I work with is trunk and nabari. Then we move on to primary branches, then we move on to secondary branches, then we move on to ramification. Every time you look at this batch of trees, until you can completely tick the box and say, yep, I am happy that I've done trunk and nabari, that's your focus. That is all your focus is. There's nothing more. You don't want to be starting to focus on, shortening branches. You don't want to start working on the apex. You don't want to just work on the trunk and nabari. So just keep those. Just keep that in mind, that's exactly what you wanna work on, and nothing more. And it's about the future goals for the tree. It's not about making it look pretty now. I don't care what it looks like now, because you've got to sort of push that foliage aside, look at the trunk, and go, look at those bends I've put in there. This is going to be a beautiful tree. This one I think is going to end up being 30, 40 centimeters tall. Sort the branches and stuff out later on. There's thinning we have to do later on, but all I'm talking about for this podcast is really that first step that you're taking with the young stock and what the development's going to be. And make sure that when you do decide to put it into a pot or ground grow it or whatever it is, just make sure that the soil's good. Make sure that if you are putting it into the ground, it can't be put into rubbish clay soil and expect miracles. The tree can only grow as well as its root system will allow it. So I would always suggest that if you are putting into a large grow container, use the best soil you can possibly get. It's just because it's at a young stage doesn't mean it doesn't need good roots. This is the chance that you get to build a really solid foundation for what the tree is going to be like in the future, and building that root system, getting that as strong as you possibly can, as soon as you possibly can, will pay dividends somewhere in the future. In the near future, it won't be too long before you actually start to see, the results of it. Your branching, your growth, everything will be great. So if it is going in the ground, maybe if it's going into a crap soil area, remove that crap soil, put in some nicer mix, make sure there's some drainage at the bottom of the hole so the tree doesn't sit in a puddle of water eventually, and just really give it the best opportunity. Just throwing something in the ground doesn't mean you're going to end up with a magnificent tree down the track. It needs to be cared for and well looked after. So, working the root ball of the tree, the nabari, the base, stage 1, trunk and nabari, not just trunk, it's trunk and nabari. So when you are at the point of putting it into the next growing position, container, ground, whatever it is, you still work the root ball. You're still getting rid of the tap roots. You're still working on that lateral root spread. Even though it's in the ground, you still want that basal flare. You want a nice nabari. So there is a lot to do with working with these whips. They can seem quite easy. They can seem quite quick and simple, and they are. But it's that planning. It's that process to go through of what will the next part be, and you don't need to have the vision of the exact tree somewhere in the future. Just at this stage, think of a trunk line, think of an approximate height. Use a marker or put a tag in the tree and say, my plan for this tree is to be 20 centimeters tall or 2 meters tall, whatever it is. So when you come back to it next time, you can look at it and go, okay, well, based on being 20 centimeters, I need to do this with the trunk movement. Or even, just give yourself a prompt. This one's slanting to the left. This one's informal, going to the right and then coming back and sitting, whatever it is. Just something so your plan is easily available, because in 12 months' time, this thing will just be a completely shaggy mess where there's, just foliage everywhere, and you've got to get back in there and go, okay, what was I thinking with this tree? Where did I want this to go? So I think it's definitely worthwhile, taking cuttings. As I said, they're the future brilliant bonsai for us and for everybody. Be careful you don't overwhelm yourself and take 1 million, because that 1 million will be, 1 million trees that you'll need to repot somewhere in the future. So make sure that it's manageable. But hopefully this is sort of helpful with what to do. And Blake, mate, I hope it gives you a path for the future. One thing that I didn't include in that first section about the whips or the tube stock or your cuttings, you definitely can cut back to future leaders on the trees as well. It doesn't always need to be about wiring. You can take what's there, grow it, pick a branch, lop off the top, let that branch become the movement of the tree. Definitely viable, and it's something that I use as well, because it gives a different feel. Sometimes the wired trees can maybe feel a bit manipulated, whereas the trees that are that clip and grow methodology really can feel a bit more natural with the tree. So you take a whip, for instance, plant it on an angle so it's going out to the right hand side or thereabouts. Continue to grow that in a straight fashion. Work out where you want your first bend to be, say going back to, for example, back to the left, and then you'd come in and just take the top off to a branch that's growing in the direction that you want. Let that continue to grow up, and again, you just keep picking where you want these branches to be, and you can have wire help and manipulate and whatever else, but it doesn't necessarily always need to be just about wiring these young trees. It can be through that clip and grow, or that grow cut method. All right, fertilising, really important, and lots of questions about it. What do I do? There's a video on my YouTube channel that shows the tea bag method and what I do. That's still consistent. Still stick with that. I haven't found a better way of doing things. And I suppose that's what I want to talk about is fertilizing has to be the methodology or the approach that you used has to be the best for you, your bonsai yard, and for your environment that you've got.
We'll be right back.
Hey, sluts! We're Plant Sluts, the podcast where botany meets sex, gossip, and all the dirt in between.
I'm Jeanette, raising my plant babies in Salem, Oregon.
I'm Jonathan, gardening in Montreal, Quebec.
Each episode, we spotlight one slutty plant with a side of garden drama, gripes, and of course, reveal its personality on the zodiac.
Think of us as your slutty plant friends, part science, part chaos, and a whole lot of banter.
So if you've ever whispered sweet nothings to your monstera, or wanted the tea on habit stacking gardening with grinder dates, we've got you.
Subscribe to Plant Sluts wherever you get your podcasts, because plants are dirty, and so are we.
Doesn't mean that one size fits all. I definitely don't think that's the case. I'm going to go through what works best for me. And it's not possible sometimes for people to fertilize in this method. You might go, well, the only way that I can do it is this way. And that's fine, definitely. The one thing that I'll start with fertilizer and fertilizing your trees, especially now in this autumn period, is consistency. You've got to make sure that you don't just do it once and forget about it. Fertilizing is one of those things that needs to be done consistently for a longish period of time to get the benefits. You know, a one-off dose, yeah, sure, it might help initially, but it's really about that ongoing consistent approach to making sure that your trees are getting exactly what they need when they need it. You know, things change with our trees, and you can interpret them as best as you possibly can. You can be a tree whisperer. You know, you can really go, well, my tree really needs this at this point in time, but it's pretty hard to tell. And often when they do show us what they need through deficiencies, it's sort of a bit late. So I try and stay always on the front foot with it, going, well, I'm just going to offer you everything. All right, if you take it, fantastic. If you don't, well, let's just make sure it's not going to do any damage on the way through, which is why I use organic fertilizers. I don't use chemical fertilizers. I only use organic. And I'm certain that there's people listening to this podcast now screaming at the speaker going, but I use this and it's fantastic. Perfect. Great. That's brilliant. And if it works for you, that's awesome. All I want to talk about is an approach that I use that's really simple, that's repeatable, it's predictable, and it's reliable. It gives me consistent results. I can do the same thing over and over and over and expect certain results with it. And it's not the first time that I've talked about fertilizing on this podcast. Hopefully it's just a refresher for almost every single person listening to the podcast, because you know, and you might even be hitting the stop play button and moving on to the next podcast in your list of things to do. But I think it's definitely timely to sort of remind what people should be doing. I use a tea bag method. There are those little plastic containers you can get, the little baskets that you can fill up with fertilizer. I use tea bags, pure and simple. They're easy. Once I fill them once, when they're finished, they're gone. I can take them off and dispose of them. You know, some are organic and break down, others aren't. So you've got to be careful about how you dispose of them. But you know, the little baskets, I don't use those because they're probably not big enough for me. I'd have to fill a hell of a lot of them to get the purpose or the result that I want. They also, when they're finished, you've got to clean the things out and then reload them. And for me, the flies can get in there and make a hell of a mess with maggots and stuff. So I find the tea bags, even though that does happen with tea bags, and I was just chatting about it the other day with a mate, that does happen definitely. It's just something I can pick up and dispose of and not have to worry about. So it's nice and easy for me. The organic fertilizers that I use, I do like Blood and Bone. I think it's, you know, very, very basic. It's very simple, and I use a pellet of almost exactly the same components. Again, so it's nothing high in nitrogen, nothing low in nitrogen, just that real mid-range, I've had conversations talking about the application of high nitrogen fertilizers, and from all parts of the world, and different benefits that it can give. Yep, yeah, sure there are, and I agree that there can be real benefit to that sort of stuff. But for me, and for my experience and what I've done, I find that an organic fertilizer, it's really gentle and mild, but sort of covers a lot of bases with a lot of different components. That for me works really well with my trees. And like I said, it gives me a really consistent result where, I know year on year, it's season on season, month by month when I'm applying, I know what I can expect, and I know how to manage the growth that comes after it, and I know what my responsibility is going to be, and the tree can use a certain amount of resources and grow a certain way, and when it doesn't happen, I know that there's something wrong. For instance, maybe not repotted, or it's watering's not correct, or whatever it is. But I know that by using this approach, I can really maintain an approach or a growing methodology from a bonsai that's very consistent, and it's reliable, and it's repeatable year on year on year. I can do it. So yeah, sure. Like I said, there's a million different ways you can fertilize your trees. There's a million different ways you can work with bonsai. There's a million different ways we can do everything. That's not my point to muddy the waters. I try and make it as simple as possible. And for me, having a lot of trees, or even just having 2 trees in the backyard, I would still use the same approach because it's very simple. And I know that by using the tea bags, every time I water, I'm offering something to the trees. Whereas liquid fertilizer, you should know my approach on liquid fertilizer. Now, I do like liquid fertilizer. I do think it's got its place. And if that's all you can do, then fantastic. But for me, I find that if I apply liquid fertilizer today to the tree may not get full whack out of it. So I'm watering it and I'm wasting it. And I think I'm doing the right thing with my trees, but I'm not, because when the tree needs what it needs, it may well be flushed out of the pot system. So, this for me, it's easy to know when to start fertilizing. I put the tea bags on. It's like bang, straight away, immediately. That starts to work. When I want to stop fertilizing, take them off. Okay, there's no residual. There's nothing left. A couple of good waters, and anything that's in the like a liquid fertilizing, anything that's left residue, I can flush out pretty quickly. So I'm not wondering. I know exactly what I'm doing and when I'm doing it. And the only thing that's a grey area for me is when those tea bags start to run out. But I give them about a month and then I reapply. It's a consistent approach for what I do, knowing that it's going to give the result. You get out there and liquid feed now. You hear Scott on the podcast saying you got to feed. Yep, go out there, liquid feed. Great. When's the next time you're going to do it? Have you put a note in your calendar, in your diary, to say, okay, I've done that today. I'm going to do it next week on the same day, and the week after, and the week after, and the week after? Or is it going to be every 3 days you're going to apply it? Is it going to be, it's going to be more frequent than that, but is it going to be once a month that you're going to be applying liquid fertilizer? The thing with it is, with your fertilizing, whatever approach you're using, it's not just a one-off thing. If you're going for, the little yellow balls, Osmocote on your tree, because that's all you can do, because, I might find that your dogs or your pets get into the tea bags and they make a hell of a mess, and it makes them sick and they can potentially die from it. So, liquid fertilizing is not efficient. So I want a slow release chemical fertilizer. Perfect. If that's what you can do, then, hey, I'm not shaming anybody. If that's what you do, that's what you do. But they deteriorate and they run out as well. So when's the next time you're going to apply that? Don't just do it once and think, well, that's it, I've fertilised for all of autumn. It's no, okay. When's the next time that you're going to do it? Set reminders for yourself and make sure that you're on top of it. I do like the fact that with my tea bags, I can multiply out. It's a ratio. 1 tea bag. If I want to double it, it's 2. If I want to double that, then it's 4. So depending on the size, obviously the size pot that you're working with is definitely going to have an impact on what what you can do with your pots. But let's say it's a small pot, you might find that to get really best bang for your buck, you're putting fresh fertilizer on there every 2 weeks. maybe with a bigger pot, and you're putting four bags on per month for 3 months through the autumn period. So it's getting 12 tea bags of fertilizer for a 3-month period. It might be a really large tree or one that's in a different stage of development that you really want to kick along. So it's 6 bags of fertilizer per month for that tree. Whatever it is, it's all fertilizing for me. It's not just, it's something that I incorporate into any plan that I've got, and I look at the tree and I go back to the plan and say, what am I trying to do with this tree? Am I just trying to maintain? Am I just trying to sort of status quo this tree? All right, so then it's going to be 2 bags of fertilizer per month, on a large tree. Right, this one, I really need to give it a bit of a kick. It needs to sort of build up its strength a little bit more. It's looking a bit lackluster. All right, it's 6 bags, and maybe I'm going to compound at the end of the month rather than taking those 6 bags off and replacing 6. It's a really large pot. I had another 4 bags on there to give it 10 bags of fertilizer, and then partway through that next month, those 6 bags come off and they get replaced with another 4 or whatever it is. I think that you just can't set and forget. It's got to be part of the future plan for that bonsai, and it's a really important one, this fertilizing and using tea bags and using organic fertilizer and making sure that you pin the bags down in the pot with a skewer or a piece of wire or something like that to stop the animals taking them away can really help. For me, it's a sheer numbers thing. I put out 400 or 500 bags of fertilizer. If they come along every night and get 3 or 4 bags of fertilizer, it's going to take them a hell of a long time to do it, to wipe me out. And by then I'll be putting new bags on there for the next month anyway. So I can go and do top-ups sporadically as I get these pest attacks. It's just part of modern suburban life, having rats around the place or birds or cats, neighbourhood cats or possums or whatever they are that come in and feed off these things, especially as you get further into autumn and the natural food supply for possums starts to disappear. They're going to look for alternatives, and fertilizer bags are a great one for them to get in there and tear them to shreds. Yeah, it annoys me, but I can just put another one on in its place and it's fixed. It's not really a problem for me. But I use the tea bag fertilizer, and this is the wrap up, I suppose. I use the tea bags and not put the fertilizer directly onto the surface of the soil, because I work hard to make sure that soil that I use is open and free of sediment and particles. And by putting fertilizer directly onto the soil surface, the pot surface, means that sediment's going to break down and get into the pot, and it's going to destroy what I've worked so hard to maintain the integrity of. So by having it inside a tea bag means that I get the goodness without getting the sediment, and I can just take it off when I want to finish fertilizing. But whatever method you use, like I said, mine's not the only way to do it. Hopefully it's an easy way for you if you are struggling with how to fertilize your trees. It's a really simple, easy method that you can use to get your trees to the next level. But whatever method it is that you're using, whatever method you can possibly use, just do the best one and be consistent with it. And it's not just a one-off set and forget. It's 3 months we've got of solid, or thereabouts, of solid fertilizing the trees to really build their strength up. So it's important for the bonsai. It's funny talking about fertilizer in autumn is a bit like talking about watering systems in summer. It's always front of mind for me. It's always something that I make sure that I'm definitely aware of, because it's really important. It is really important. It's one of the tasks that we do that's simple. It's not complex, but it probably gives the best bang for our buck. And you're not going to see it necessarily now, but it's for years into the future. It's for it's for in what you're doing now. Can help build the strength and structure of the tree. So, for the next forever period for that bonsai that you're working on, they don't get attacked by pests. They get really strong spring growth. They take steps forward. The foliage looks great. It's got nice colouring about it. You don't get fungal issues. You don't get branch dieback. Well, hopefully you don't get branch dieback, but you can work with it a lot more consistently and make sure that the thing keeps taking those steps forward with your plan, because you've done this work. And it might seem like a real pain putting fertilizer in tea bags, 3 times over the next 3 months. But you do it once, you put it on the tree, bar replacing for stolen fertilizer bags. Pretty much that's it. So doing all that work to get these tea bags out on your tree or apply fertilizer, however you're doing it, to do that now means that for such a long period in the future, you're going to see benefit from it with the tree. And it's about strength, it's about health, it's about longevity, it's about this thing outlasting us and becoming the world's best bonsai. So little things, fertilizer is one of those jobs that I would put down as absolutely mandatory and not negotiable, not something that you can miss and say, oh, well, I'll pick it up next year. It's do it now, because otherwise, you might see impacts. And especially one of the things I do around the yard at the moment is planning for repotting. Looking at the trees, doing the maths. How much soil mix do I need? Do I need new pots? All that sort of stuff. But it's also, okay, is the tree strong enough? It's obviously needing repotting because it's getting quite dense in there. How's the tree's health and strength? Will it be okay to be repotted in the appropriate season? Do I need to do anything with it now? Do I need to fertilise this tree? What's my fertilising approach? If it's struggling a little bit now, maybe it's the first fertiliser is very gentle, very mild. Just something to get the tree used to it. I don't want to overdose it with fertiliser. And then the next time I apply fertiliser, I put a stronger dose on there for the tree and start building it up that way. There's so many different ways to work with a tree, but it comes back to that having a plan thing and thinking about what the tree needs, and as its custodian, making sure that you're doing the absolute very best that you possibly can be. Anyway, enough about that. I'm going to move on the next couple of episodes. I want to talk about good structure is good bonsai and sort of elaborate on that. It's a fella by the name of Red got in contact with me and thought, he said, hey, your earlier podcast, you talked about it. Maybe you could expand on that a little bit more. And that's a great idea. It really is what I see. So next couple of episodes will be on the structure of your trees and why good structure is good bonsai, why it's extremely important. Have a great week in bonsai. I'll be back next week with some more interesting bonsai facts, knowledge, insights, whatever I can do to make your bonsai life that little bit better. Thanks for listening in. Love you as always. Till next time, happy bonsai.